were a kid and you dreamed of being the absolute best at something, whether you were going to be a doctor, a rock star, or a pro athlete, you had this incredible drive inside of you. I am going to be something amazing. Then years later, you realize that dreams don't just happen on their own. You have to show up every single day, not just when you feel like it. And for myself, I needed a good coach, a mentor. We all need good teammates and partners who believe in us when we don't believe in ourselves. It doesn't matter if you want to win a gold medal or become a better version of yourself, personally or professionally. It takes a real first step. So whatever your dreams or goals, you have to surround yourself with like-minded people who will inspire you, motivate you, and keep you accountable.
And we are live. We are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Transformation Live with Jamie Saleh here on the worldwide global internet of the world. How's Jamie Saleh today?
Amazing. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm doing great. Awesome. Thanks. So,
Mm-hmm.
thanks to everyone joining us today on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube today, Jamie. Just so you know, we're going to push your limits is what we're doing. So listen, I'm so excited about your show today. I mean, the fact that here I am talking as an announcer or a broadcast, whatever you want. The story of this guy is unbelievable. And I think, you know, I mean, we're generally the same age, watching this guy my whole life on TV. And I'm thinking, now here I am you're introducing this guy. Anyway, he has an amazing story. We got a great show today. So go ahead, please tell us, who do we have on the show today?
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. Well, my special guest today is one of the best known personalities in Canadian broadcasting. He hosts First Up on TSN 1050 in Toronto. He hosted TSN's Off the Record since its debut in September of 1997. The highly acclaimed 30-minute daily sports debut program was one of Canada's longest-running talk shows. I also had the honor of being on it. He started his broadcasting career as an anchor on SportsCenter, then called Sports Desk, and went on to host more than 5,000 episodes. He speaks very publicly about his personality battle with depression and considers his ability to help reduce the stigma of mental illness as his most important professional calling. He is the ambassador for Bell Let's Talk Day and is the now host of Isolation Nation, Sick Not Weak. His documentary, Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me, earned a Canadian Screen Award nomination in 2013. I am incredibly proud to be the interviewer today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend, Michael Landsberg. Woo!
Hey, Jamie Saleh. I don't know if you saw me. I was doing this and I was doing like wrap it up. I was desperate to shut you up because I don't like hearing about myself. I don't handle compliments well, and especially intros. I mean, they tend to be. I think what they are is they tend to be the host's way, and I've done this a million times, the host's way of kissing the guest's ass to try to get more out of them as opposed to giving something to the audience. So let's try it all over again, okay? All you need to say is, hey, it's my buddy Michael. Then we'll go.
All right. Today, my friend, Michael Landsberg.
You're such a troublemaker. I said, buddy, you said friend. Why can't you listen to me, Jamie Saleh? You said that you were coachable. I don't think that you're coachable. How are you?
I email you, buddy. I'm awesome. How are you doing?
You know, I'm great. I would say, I hesitate to say this, but because so many people are, you know, at this time are struggling so terribly and have really, you know, so many issues. But, you know, for me, like the pandemic and the isolation and the social distancing has been actually pretty amazing because of the things I've got to do. You mentioned Isolation Nation. I did that show every day for 60 weekdays in a row. And besides burning the hell out of myself, I also found it incredibly rewarding. So I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm also really well. I'm like you. I've taken this opportunity of sort of a quieter time, buddy, to create content and connect with people differently. And I get to have people like you on a show that I never thought I would be doing. But I just want to say to everybody listening, and I'm not kissing your butt right now, that not only have I been on Off the Record with you, but also on Isolation Nation. It's a real honor to have you on this show with me, because I know everybody's busy, and I know you have so many things going on, and you're doing so many incredible things. So I just want to say thank you right now for taking time.
I am incredible. Yeah, my pleasure. I'm incredibly busy. One sec, just record it. We'll watch it later. Yeah, I got nothing going on. We stopped doing Isolation Nation for a brief pause. So right now, and I took the week off of radio. So I got nothing but time for you. But as I've said to you before, and this gets self-serving, so let's just move past it. But you've always been one of my favorite people, and I've always thought that I've always thought that you had a spark to you that was somewhat infectious. So I should probably put on my mask to prevent me from getting infected with the Jamie Soleil transformation positivity. But I'll go with it.
No, we all need more of it, right? Don't put your mask on for that. Oh, I love it. Well, speaking of transformation, so obviously, you know, the show is all about transformation. So I want to ask you, like I ask all my guests, how would you describe the concept of transformation for you, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I guess there's micro and there's macro transformation. I think for me, the biggest thing in my life was the transformation for me from a shy, introverted, afraid student in high school to the same sort of thing at the University of Toronto, to a guy not that many years later who was comfortable in his own skin, comfortable on television, comfortable on radio, comfortable enough to go and do auditions. And I think that the transformation, when I see people who I went to high school with, you know, their first thing they say is like, what the hell happened to you? In a good way, right? Because I was the least likely candidate to make his living from being a performer, so to speak, of anyone that I went to high school with. So for me, that's the big transformation that I've undergone in my life.
People must be really proud of you. All the people that saw you, that see you now from high school or from university, really proud of you. It's like, and do you have a lot of people that weren't even very kind to you back then that want to be your best buddy now? Well,
I mean, there certainly was an element of that. I mean, for me in high school, it wasn't so much that people, you know, didn't gravitate towards me. It was more that I had my circle of friends. I came from an incredibly close household, where I was totally supported, where me and my brother, there was two of us in my family. My parents, you know, did everything for us, loved everything that we did. And so I didn't really need a lot outside my house. I had a handful of friends. We all watched sports together. And that was it. But when I would walk into school, for instance, and, you know, I remember when I was in grade 11, the English teacher came up to me and said, "Are you okay?" And this is Mr. Fraser. And I said to him, "Sir, why do you ask me?" And he said, "Well, you don't seem like you seem like you're down, or you seem like you're nervous, or," and I said, no, it's just me. And it was like, it wasn't until years later that I realized how impressive it was that he did that, because that's what we encourage our teachers to do, is to look beyond the obvious with their students. But that was me in high school. Like, you know, I wasn't the shyest guy in high school, but I may have been in the top 10.
Wow. Interesting, because I would not have guessed that about you.
No. And, you know, broadcasting brought me out, I think. Broadcasting became the safe place for me, where there was nothing else on the planet that was available to me other than being a broadcaster. So, I mean, I have so many lessons that I can share with people, because I am them. Like, I use my brother as a great example. Like, he can't share anything with people when it comes to his success in life and how he found his way. He's a genius, right? So he got a scholarship to go into medical school. He got a scholarship to becoming a kidney doctor. The guy, you know, literally was able to do anything he wanted. Now, that doesn't mean he hasn't had huge struggles in his life. He has. But in terms of career, Jamie, I had nothing. I was failing out of University of Toronto. I didn't want to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer. I didn't want to be any of those things. And that's all I knew, because I came from a house where my dad was an orthodontist. My mom ran his office. My brother became a kidney doctor. I only had one uncle, and he was a chartered accountant. All I knew was professional. And I also knew that none of that wanted me, and I didn't want it. And then one day I decided, hey, you know what? I got nothing. I'm not heading anywhere. I'm a total loser when it comes to school, when it comes to career, when it comes to drive. And I walked into U of T radio. Honestly, I can remember the exact day. And I remember walking in and pushing the button to open up the microphone. And a red light went on the button to indicate the microphone was on. And I started speaking, and it was like, oh my God, there's a place for me in this world. Oh my gosh, it was the first time that like this light went on the button and in my head, because I remember thinking to myself, this is where I belong. And now I understood why people were so driven to accomplish things in their life, because they found what it was they wanted.
What they love. How powerful. Look where you're at today.
Yeah, you know, ask me about the rest of my career at University of Toronto. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show.
No, it's pretty fast. I failed. They kicked me out. See, I used to go with they kicked me out because it sounds sexier than I failed out, right? You know, if they kicked me out, you could go, oh my God, what did he do? And it, you know, failed out just means that, well, just means that you failed out. So
you failed out. Well, we've all failed at things many times. You got to get up and keep going. You were so kind to have me on your show, Isolation Nation, Sick Not Weak. And you asked my mom to join us for the conversation, which was so awesome of you. Thank you. My mom has been such a big part of my life, as you know. She's always been my biggest supporter as I chased my dreams. And she's still one of my biggest fans today. Thanks, Mom. And in your documentary, Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me, a film that you narrate and that talks about dealing with and recovering from mental illnesses, you said that you felt something was different for you as early as 5 or 6 years old. And of course, as a young child, you don't have the language or the life experience to process these kinds of feelings. So can you take us back into your early childhood and the relationships that you had with your mom and other family members, and talk to us about how you knew something was different, and what did you do to cope with cope through these early times of your life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you should just sort of sit back and relax and maybe grab a beverage, because I'll keep it to the key points. The key points are that I was just writing actually when I clicked on your link to speak to you. I'm writing a foreword for a book. Written by a guy named Brant Myers. Brant Myers played in the NHL. Brant Myers was a fighter in the NHL. He's the only guy in NHL history, I think, to actually be kicked out of the league for drugs. Like he was in the program, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Eventually they said, you're done. But he ended up finding his way. And he and I connected in 2011 on Off the Record. And he was one of maybe 3 people in my life that I actually invited him over to my house for dinner. And he came over for dinner that night. And we've been friends ever since. And he wrote this book about his sobriety for the last 12 years, his challenges. Just the fact that he's alive is amazing. And I mentioned that because I was writing the foreword for the book. I have to get it in tomorrow. And one of the things I talked about was my own mental health, obviously, because his book is about his battles with mental health and addiction. And one of the things that I recalled was the power that I felt, the vindication that I felt. The day that I read I don't remember where it was, the day that I found out that this fear that I had, this fear of throwing up, this fear of being around people that throw up, this fear of perhaps being around someone who might one day throw up, drove me crazy. And it drove a lot of my life, right? Because I wouldn't do things that other kids would do. I wouldn't ride on a bus to camp. I wouldn't sleep over at camp. There was a million things that, but you see, I never told anyone that, even though you asked me about my relationship with my mom and my dad. You know, I came from this loving home where I was cherished. I felt loved all the time. And I have felt that throughout my life from then to then. When I was 24, I married Karen, and I have felt that way ever since, supported and loved, which I think allows me to talk about mental health and my own struggles without shame and embarrassment, because I know no matter what I've done, people have supported me. So back to the emetophobia, I never mentioned it to my parents because I didn't know. I just kind of thought that I was a loser when it came to that. You know, I had no idea that I was sick. I had no idea that I had general anxiety disorder. I had no idea that I had that phobia. I had all of these worries inside me, these fears that I had inside me that I never shared with anyone else, because I wasn't like I thought I'd be sharing an illness. I just thought that this was how I'm wired. No one else is wired that way. I'm just kind of a loser who is afraid to go on a bus and ride with some kid beside me in case the kid throws up. And then I read there's actually an illness called emetophobia. And I had a lot of anxieties, as I said, at that point in my life. So I knew that I can't say I knew I was different, but I wondered whether other people felt the same way. And in my generation, you know, it was, you know, I'm kind of part of the generation that's just waking up from 200 years of stigma. So you're in the next generation where you're a little bit more awake. And as time goes on, I think that people are waking up more. But for me, I never thought that I could just say to my parents, and I could have said anything to them. Literally, like if I would have said that, they would have done anything for me. But I learned how to wear the mask, and I learned how to pretend, and I learned how to show people not what I was feeling, but what I thought they wanted to see in me.
Mm-hmm. I remember, I also remember you saying that you felt embarrassed.
Oh, yeah. I did. I mean, especially at that age. I mean, that had so much to do with my own confidence, right? And the fact that I was not social. Like I became arguably the most social person you're ever going to meet. Like I walk into an airport, into the departure lounge, and if I travel a lot on my own, I used to travel a lot on my own to give speeches about mental health, right? So I'd be flying to Calgary, and I would go into the departure lounge, and I would find an empty seat. I would sit there, and I would turn to the person beside me and go, "What's going on?" That's me. That's who I am. You know, I like people. I like to talk. I like to be part of. I like how I feel when I'm giving of myself, so to speak. But when I was in high school, that's the thing that scared me the most, which is just, it's kind of, I mean, it should be inspiring to other people that you can become the person that you want to be, that it's not written in stone, that because you're a certain way when you're 16, that you're going to be that way for the rest of your life.
Right. I love that. So, Michael, everyone has important dates in their lives. For example, birthdays and wedding anniversaries, things like that. But you have some very specific dates that have become part of your conversations around mental illness and recovery. So if I may, I'd like to simply just mention a couple of those dates right now. And when I do, I'd like for you to share with our listeners the significance of those dates so that people can get a glimpse into your incredible journey of navigating very, very challenging times in your life, if that's okay.
Hey, let's do that. And the answer to your first one is Montreal, but go ahead.
Yeah, November 19th, 2008.
It was the 24th, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, you blew it. All that research showing off. And November 24th, 2008, Marriott Hotel in the city of Montreal. Off the Record is there shooting the Grey Cup. It's 4 a.m. in the morning. I'm in room 521. And I'm sitting on the edge of my bed. And I'm thinking, wow, I understand why people take their own lives. And it's not that I was a threat to myself. Because I still maintained a bit of hope because I'd been through it before. I had gone on meds and gotten better substantially and then gone off meds and relapsed. And this was the deepest relapse of my life, but I've been through it before. So I had at least a little hope. But I remember sitting on the edge of the bed and I remember telling Karen the next morning that I was in really bad shape. And I thought to myself, wow, if you told me that I had to live like this the rest of my life, or if I thought I had to live like that the rest of my life, I was in a position where I would have not really cared whether I lived or died. And there's a difference between saying I want to die than there is to saying I want to live, but I don't really care if I live. Those are different degrees, I think, of the same thing. So for me, it was this moment of, wow, I think I really understand it. And, you know, Karen said to me, why didn't you call me? And I said to her, what were you going to do? You know, like, I mean, it's all well and good for us to say you're never alone. And that's a very popular thing to say when it comes to mental health. But the truth is, part of it, you are alone, right? You know, if you're battling cancer, God forbid, and someone says to you, well, there's others of us that have battled it, you're never alone. It's, well, that's true, but it's also false. It's true because others understand what you're going through, but it's also false because there's no one there that is, you can't share your pain with other people. So next date.
It's interesting you say that, because I've had many dark nights where I've been literally physically paralyzed. I can't get out of my bed. The discomfort, the anxiety is so immense for me that I can't get out of bed. But I've never had thoughts of, you know, what it would look like if I wasn't here, or how I would do it.
Did you?
I can't even imagine what you've gone through and what many people like you live with. Like,
did you hesitate to say the word there? Because I'm saying this for a reason. I'm not playing a game with you, but you say the word suicide.
Suicide. Like there were days when I felt like I didn't want to live. But to actually take my life and commit suicide was not an option for me. So I'm listening to you, and I've heard you talk so many times about this, and I think, like, such a dark tunnel. Like, I can't even imagine.
You know, there's a thing that comes with all mental illness, I think, and especially depression and anxiety. And I kind of see the two of them as being, brother and sister, depression and anxiety. Very few people would have 100% one, 0% the other. And at different times in my life, like, I never had depression when I was a kid. I didn't have depression until I was 40 years old. But then when it hit me, I realized at that moment, this was me. When I realized that I was sick, it was, wow, oh my God. This is 1,000 times worse than I ever thought it would be. Oh my gosh, this is depression. Oh, I'm so sorry to all the people that I thought, they got to suck it up. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. And that was kind of like the education of Michael Landsberg then about depression.
Wow. Okay. Well, I hope I have my second date right, but October 20th, 2009.
That would have been Stéphane Richet's show on Off the Record. Okay, so I'm going to talk real fast, and if you want to slow it down later on when you play this back, you can. I know that we're live right now, but you'll play it back later on, and if you want to slow it down so people can understand better, that's fine. But here's the story. Stéphane Richet was a guest on Off the Record. I had read moments before I went out to greet him that he had suffered from depression in the 1990s. So I thought, oh, that'll be a good question. I had just come off a bad year, obviously, as I told you about. I was feeling better. I was doing better. So I said, hey, Stéphane, would it be okay if I asked you how you're doing with your depression? And he said, no, it's very painful for me. So I said to him, well, if you'll talk about it, I'll talk about it. And he said to me, you'll talk about it? What do you mean by that? And I said to him, well, I've suffered too. And he said, really? Tell me about it. So I told him. And then he said, okay, let's do it. So we went on the air, and for 90 seconds, we talked. And that was it. And that changed my life, Jimmy. Like, my life is going in this direction. I don't mean for better. Well, actually, it was for better, but it's going like this. And then Stéphane Richet says, okay, yeah, I'll talk about it. And then the two of us talk about it in the air. And then the next morning, I start getting emails telling me how powerful it was for people to hear two men talking about it. Now I'm going in a totally different direction. I found out, oh my gosh, I have the power to make a difference in people's lives without doing anything other than what I want to do, which is talk.
TSN turning point.
That was for sure, and I had never spoken about it before. I mean, so I had suffered from depression for 10 years before that, but I never spoke about it because I never thought anyone would care. I thought it was, I was so ignorant about the stigma because I didn't feel the stigma at that part of my life. When I first went for help, I went to a psychiatrist and he put me on Prozac, or she put me on Prozac. And I came back to work and I said, hey, anybody else here on Prozac? So it's not like I was embarrassed. I just thought, to be honest with you, perfectly candid, I thought people see me as arrogant. I heard that every day. I've heard that every day of my professional life, like every day. And so they're just going to see me if I say, hey, I have a mental illness. They're just going to see me as looking for their sympathy and trying to get them to like me. And I thought there's no value in that. And then on that one day, I found out that, you can. And when I say you, I mean me and you and anybody else who has any kind of platform can save lives just by talking about their own struggle.
Oh, so powerful. That was such a pinnacle time in your life, and discovering your passion and taking it to the next level, Michael. You're doing incredible things for millions of people. Thank you.
Well,
you know how much I appreciate this.
I do. And you and I have mutual admiration, right? Which is not sort of typical, TV, social media kind of ass kiss. I mean, the truth is that I think the world of you. I believe you think the world of me. So it's mutual, but also you mentioned millions of people that I'm helping, which may be a slight exaggeration, but there's one that you have to put one on that list if you were naming them all, and that would be me. This has given me a chance in my life to do something of real worth, right? Something that I know makes a difference. And it's like all roads of my life lead me to this conversation with you. So here's a road. I'm a professional talker. That's all I've done for most of my life. I've had this mental illness for the last 20 years, and it has debilitated me, as you heard. I've never hesitated to share this illness, so I'm not uniquely qualified, but I'm qualified to be in this position. If you put all those three roads together, that's me talking mental health.
Well, and you have an incredible online show called Isolation Nation, where the main theme is Sick Not Weak. It's a platform where you have open and transparent conversations with guests about exactly what we're talking about, all things mental health. Now, as a very experienced broadcaster, as you have said, and I have witnessed, we've all witnessed, speaker and host, I know that you're aware of the power of words and how those words are communicated. So for your show, you have chosen the words like isolation, as well as the phrase sick, not weak. So I want you to tell us why you decided to use these kinds of titles or names for your show, and what is your overall hope for the show and the message of the theme?
Since Sick Not Weak kind of launched gently, and by that I mean after 2010 on the Stefan Riche show, I could recap it for you in 10 seconds. You may not understand it, but I could do that. Since that point, I started giving speeches about mental health. And I found that at the heart of the stigma was the idea that people were embarrassed and ashamed, and that I was doing something that most people couldn't do, and that is just go without shame and embarrassment. Hey, I suffer from depression. I'm on medication. I understand suicide. People had a great deal of trouble doing that. So I thought to myself, okay, there's something here that's at the core of their perception. And I was giving a speech at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto to a bunch of young leaders. And I said, I looked up, it was in medical school there. So I was in a room where they were all slanted chairs, or, like it was raised up, and I was standing at the front with a chalkboard behind me and all kinds of projection. I mean, they taught in that room. So I looked up and I said, hey, is anybody here willing to speak the truth to me? I know that the majority of you see mental illness different than you would see something like lupus or something like cancer or diabetes. I know that you see that. So I just want someone to say it so we can debate it, right? So one guy put up his hand and he said, I see it that way. Like, I'm not saying it's a good thing to get, but it's not like, he said to me, Michael, it's not like you have cancer, it's not like you can't help it. It's not like you can't choose to be better. And I thought, okay, well, this is great, because anyone who's listening to what he said would listen and go, oh my God, that guy sounds like an idiot. How it's not like you can't help it or whatever. So I said, look, I am sick, obviously, and I need you to believe that. But I also need you to believe that I'm not weak. And I have no idea how we went from that one conversation at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto to naming our charity Sick Not Weak, to having it really be the only thing that I can do to people and for people is to go give a speech, for instance. And if I said sick, not weak, if those were my first words, the next hour of my speech would all relate to that, would all be proof that mental illness is a sickness, not a weakness. It would all be proof that those who are struggling in the audience need to understand that they're not weak. In fact, you know, I've said this, who seems to be, so here I am doing a corporate speech and there's 500 people in the audience. And I say, okay, I mean, I'm trying to prove a point here. So it's not like you can take a poll, but of all the people in this room right now, who would you say seems to be the strongest? And they all say me, right? Because I've just spent the last half hour talking about my struggles with mental illness. So I say, okay, I'll buy that. So why is it that you think I'm strong, but when it comes to you and your fears of sharing with someone, you feel like you are weak? And, you know, that's taught me so much about using my own illness to change people's view of theirs.
So I love this sick, not weak phrase, because as you know, with so many sports, and I didn't have to deal with this in figure skating, thank goodness, but in so many sports, it is considered a weakness. So you're giving so many, not just well, you're giving athletes as well a platform to speak out on and to share. I can't tell you how much more awareness this has created with you being an ambassador for this, because now you've got hockey players and football players and basketball players. I mean, Daryl Strawberry, all these kinds of people that you've interviewed, and you're talking about their mental illness, and it's powerful for them, because for so long these athletes have felt scared and weak. And so now you're creating this awareness within the sporting community as well. So thank you for that.
Well, stop thanking me, first of all. Second of all, you know what, Jamie, you know what it comes down to? It comes down to, I think, it's not saying the words, it's how you say the words. So if you get in front of a group of people and you say, you know, I was diagnosed with depression 20 years ago, and God, I don't know why I get like this. I just feel sometimes I feel like I just, you know, don't have much going for me. And I know I shouldn't feel that way. That's weakness. That says to everyone who's listening to me, oh, Landsberg thinks he's weak. He thinks that this is his problem. But if you get in front of people and say, you know what? I got this illness that is not my fault. God, who would ever want this illness? I can't will it away. I didn't will it upon myself. I am sick. And if you don't believe it, I don't give a shit, because I know that I'm sick. I know that this is not my fault. And if you say it with strength, I think people who want to be perceived as being strong see it the same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's really powerful too, because, you know, having Robert Paris on, he talked a lot about that, the neuroscience of the brain. And, you know, we were on that same show together. So that really resonated with me about not apologizing and knowing that it's not your fault. I love that.
It's like, okay, share, but share with strength. Because like, you know, if you go into your employer and you're worried, oh my gosh, am I going to be seen differently? And you knock on the door and you come in and you sit down and you're really meek and you're really hesitant, then what are you saying? You're saying, okay, well, you know, I got this thing that, you know, maybe is my own fault. But if you get in there and you say, look, you know, this is the way it is. And if you do it like this too, it's very effective.
Nobody heard that. I love that. Okay, so I also wanted to mention that I saw one of your recent shows where you had very young people come on and share their stories of mental illness. I thought that was such a wonderful thing to do, because suicide is the second leading cause of death with people under 25 years old. Can you share with us why you think it is so important that you use your show so that young people can have this conversation?
You know, it really is about only one thing when it comes to what it is I do, what it is we do, Sick Not Weak, and that is to try to create dialogue. And in particular, something like suicide has been left out of the dialogue forever. You know, it's never been accepted that parents should talk about mental illness and suicide to their kids. It's pretty well accepted universally, except for maybe some people on the religious right, for real, that you talk to your kids about sex. that you talk to your kids about drugs, that you try to prevent them from making mistakes in their life, that you try to warn them about the bad things that are out there. But the thing that you most have to worry about is your child taking his or her life, or your child living with the misery of anxiety or depression or any other mental illness. So we never talk about it. And when you don't talk about it, you don't give your son or your daughter the opportunity to come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I don't feel well right now. I don't know why. Because, I mean, that's hard enough as it is to say that to your parent if they've mentioned it. It's impossible to say it. It's impossible to conceive of going to somebody that loves you and saying, I have thoughts of ending my life, because you know that that will devastate them, right? So you have to throw it on the table. You have to make it part of the conversation. It can't be this foreign language that no one feels comfortable speaking. And that's why we do that. That's why we do everything we do, which is to create dialogue and conversation. No one is ever going to say again with any credibility that talking about suicide, for instance, is a bad thing. I mean, I remember going to North Battleford, Saskatchewan to give a speech. They had 3 teenage suicides in 2 weeks. North Battleford, Saskatchewan is an important place for me for a couple of reasons. Wade Belak is from North Battleford. His parents still live there, and I've gotten close with them since he died. But there's also Tyson Williams, who was watching on the 20th of November. Was it November or October? When Stefan Richer, that show. So Tyson Williams was watching from Battleford, Saskatchewan. And he was in the process when I responded to his response of hanging himself. Can you imagine? Can you imagine, like, what's the benefit of sharing? Well, he was going to hang himself. He did have a belt looped around his neck in his closet, and he heard the computer go, and it was me. So eventually we went back and forth. And I mean, that story is an amazing story to start with. And it just takes off amazing places, good places. But he's from Battleford as well. So I thought we should go out there and we should do something. So we went to the Civic Center. We put on this really cool show, which was with some Saskatchewan Rough Riders. We had musicians, both local and national. And we just put on a show to give them some positivity when it came to this devastating thing called mental illness, called depression, called suicide, and to try to educate them a little bit better and to get them to talk about it, right? So here we are going to this city, and I get booked. They say, okay, well, you're coming here. The mayor said to me, I was lying on my couch right there, which is pretty typical. I mean, you could almost bet that I was lying on my couch right there because I do that a lot. And the mayor said to me, Michael, would you come to the high schools and speak? And I said, of course I would come to the high schools and speak. You know, I'm not going to Battleford for money, that's for sure, because, you know, I'm not getting paid to be there. And in fact, we got to raise the money to be able to do it. So I said, sure. I got there, and the mayor said to me, sorry, man, the high schools won't allow it. I said, okay, why not? They said, well, they're afraid. They think if you mention suicide, that you'll give kids ideas. And I said to him, look, it's not for me. Yeah. It's not for me to argue in your community. If this is what you want to do or not do, then I'm not, like, it's not my place to argue with you. But I'm telling you that that is wrong, that no kid ever went, wait a second here. I think, wait a sec, you can kill yourself? Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know now. And, you know, like, so that, but that's the world that we live in.
Yeah, no, it's, I've talked to so many parents about this and how the fear of even bringing it up, it's like a suggestion. It's like, keep it, you know, not every kid is going to sit there, like you just said, and go, oh, that's an idea, right? I mean, it's actually, when you think about it, it's kind of, and without judgment, I don't want to say it's ridiculous for the parents to think that way. It's just awareness. We need awareness on the importance of talking about it. I have no problem talking to my kids about sex and drugs and all these other things. And so we do talk about all this, and it's really, really important.
It is. And, you know, I'm sure you know the name, and I'm sure your husband knows him, Luke Richardson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Luke Richardson played 20 years, I think, in the NHL. I mean, who plays 20 years in the NHL? Yeah. Everybody loves Luke because, for one reason, everybody knows Luke because he played for like a dozen NHL teams. But he was coaching in Ottawa. He'd been living in Ottawa. He was assistant coach with the Sens, and then he ended up being the head coach with Binghamton, their AHL team. And his 14-year-old daughter, Darren, took her own life. And the words that he said to me have driven my life in this area. He said, Michael, we talked about everything. We talked about drugs and sex, and we talked about school, and we talked about being responsible, but we never talked about mental illness. We never talked about suicide. And the price that we paid for that is horrendous. And I think of him a lot. First of all, I think of him a lot because he's a great guy and his wife is a wonderful woman. And it's heartbreaking what happened to them, but also the lesson that he had to learn in the ultimate hard way.
I remember that very well. Ooh, everybody, you always wonder, like, how do you not know? Like, how did they not know? Or how did so-and-so not know? But if you're not talking about it.
Hey, there's... why did you get to be better at figure skating? I mean, it's a pretty abstract question, so I'll give you the answer. And you'll go, yeah, of course. Well, you said you found a coach, right? Which was one thing. But also you practiced, right? It's the only way that you can get better at anything. And I think when you and I were talking about you hosting a show, I said, hey, one of the things you should do is practice, right? You don't have to be looking into a camera to practice. It's just talking. So you got better at that. And you also got better because you had this coaching. But for me, the answer to your point, which was how do you not see it? The answer is that me, as a person that has this illness, I practice faking it every single day. And at the beginning, maybe I'm not good at it. But when you do it 12 hours a day, every single day, when your goal when you wake up in the morning is to make sure that no one thinks that you are struggling in any way. If that is your goal, you're going to get better at it. And what we do, people with mental illness, what we do is we show you in a conversation, not what we're feeling, but what we think you want to see in us. Right. And we get so good at that tragically, when people die, Jamie, all the time you hear, no one knew. Oh my gosh, she took her own life and no one knew. And that's because we get really good at faking it.
That scares me a little bit, but...
It should, but also, you're one of the mechanisms in place to prevent you from experiencing this awful tragedy is your fear that it will happen because you can take action. Like I'm always very wary to make this point that I'm not preaching here. I'm not judging here. I'm not saying that as a parent, if you haven't spoken to your kid about suicide, that you have failed your kid. I'm not saying that if you lost a kid to suicide, that you failed your kid if you never talked about it. I'm saying that now, as we learn more and more, we learn that making it part of the dialogue at least opens the door for the possibility that your kid will come to you and say, I don't feel good. Yeah.
Oh, super important. Making them feel welcome to the dialogue. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to do. I mean, it's one thing to talk to your kids about sex. It's another thing to get your kids to be able to talk to you about sex. I mean that's hard for a lot of parents, right? So how do you not just say it once, but how do you open the door of communication? So it's tough for sure.
Okay, Michael, let's talk about where you're at today. It is 2020. You have a great show that brings people together. And you have an incredible family who I adore very much and loves you and supports you. And obviously from the outside, or the way it seems to be, that you're living your life's mission right now. Can you share with our listeners how you would like to see the rest of 2020 unfold for you? And maybe even perhaps some insight on what people can do right now to start their own journey of positive change or transformation for themselves, specifically when it comes to mental health.
Well, I'll answer your first question first. And the question was, me and what are my hopes for the rest of 2020? Yeah. I mean, part of that becomes incredibly complicated at this point because now in 2020, on July the 21st, we are facing a pandemic, right? That if you would ask me the same question last year, my answer would have been totally self-serving and totally about me and how I want to see the rest of the year play out. But I want to see, obviously, first and foremost, I want to see the rest of the year play out where we get beyond this, where, you know, people that lost their jobs, they start to get their jobs back. I mean, I've been one of the blessed ones, and I don't mean religious blessed because I'm not a religious person, but I use the word blessed instead of lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones who I still get paid by TSN. I still have my job. I have found that the need for mental health talk is greater now than it's ever been before.
Yes.
So, you know, the need for us at Sick Not Weak doing what we do is greater now. People need to hear this voice, whether it's my voice or anyone else. So what I hope for the rest of 2020 is to somehow move past this. And I'm talking about, you know, the need to socially distance and getting back to some sense of normalcy. And then I'm hoping that one of the pitches that I've done and one of the pitches that I will do will result in someone going, oh my gosh, I love what you guys do. I have money. You have the energy, the inclination. You have a message that needs to be heard. Here's my money. You give me your message and we'll get it out to people. That's what I'm hoping for, because, you know, I've never solicited funds. You know, I've never knocked on anyone's door until like last week. I sent out a pitch to somebody. It's the first time in my life that I've actually gone and asked for a donation. I'm not good at asking for things. I'm not good at asking for help, but it's weird because it's not for me, right? I'm not asking. I don't get paid by the charity. So it's kind of selfless. But even then, I was like hesitating as I'm typing to write down an amount. It's like, no, don't ask for it. Don't ask for it. And then it's like, what the hell are you doing, Michael? Ask for it. So that's what I hope.
Well, what about some insight for people with mental illness moving forward throughout the rest of the year? What can you recommend?
Dialogue, for sure. I mean, it's kind of like there was a song by David Gates and Bread called Words Are All I Have to Take Your Heart Away. I could sing it, but then you would go, oh my God, he's a terrible singer.
Sing it. We'll sing together.
I could sing Jamie Soleil. That was Sean Cullen's song for you, which I have in my head.
Oh, Sean, I love Sean.
Yeah, Sean's awesome. But words are all that we have. You know, I'm not doing research in a lab for a new treatment for mental illness. I'm not building a hospital. I'm just trying to create dialogue, and dialogue is never a bad thing. So what I hope for people in 2020 and beyond is the acknowledgement that, hey, you know what? I watched Jamie Soleil's, this is like the dream for me, right? I watched Jamie Soleil's show Transformation, and she had that guy Landsberg from TSN on. But you know what? He might be a bit of a jerk, but I heard him talking about mental illness, and he made some sense about the need for dialogue. He made some sense about the need for us to speak to each other. That's the dream for me, for someone to say, oh my gosh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tap the person that sleeps beside me on the shoulder, and I'm going to say, you know what, honey? I want to talk to you because I know that you have battled depression for a while now. And I know I've acted like I know what I'm talking about. I've acted like I know what's best for you. But I watched this guy talking, and he made it clear that if you haven't had depression, you can't understand depression. So I want you to know that I apologize for all the stupid suggestions I made, that I apologize for acting like I knew what was wrong with you and how to help you. And most of all, I want to apologize for saying, wait for it, we all go through it sometime. No, we don't all go through it sometime, Jamie. We don't all go through it. Sure, people, all of us go through bad times in our life. All of us lose people that we love. All of us have disappointments in our life. But that's not the illness, depression. That's the normal evolution of your life. And I want people to understand that if you care about someone with this illness, then you need to make it clear to them that you don't understand.
Well, Michael, I'm going to call my mom today, and my dad, actually. And I'm going to ask for their forgiveness, because as a young teenager, I didn't understand what they were going through. I used to think, like, get your shit together. What's wrong with you? You know, I didn't get it. And as an adult, I appreciate now having my own struggles with anxiety and speaking with people like you. And you're such a powerhouse in this department, and you're helping so many people. I'm going to you've impacted me today. I'm going to make that phone call.
Yeah, a couple of things about you making that phone call. Number one, I heard you and your mom together, and you told her exactly what you just told me. You actually said to her, because I remember from the first time you were on the show when you were talking about it, how your mom suffered from very severe, debilitating depression. Yeah. And that you said, I put my mom to bed many, many nights when she was crying. And you said, Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't understand better. But then you also said, Mom, you always put on a happy face for me. You always, whenever I had something that I accomplished in my life or that I really wanted, you were always there. So I wouldn't say to your mom in any way, hey, Mom, I'm sorry that I wasn't more attentive. First of all, you were attentive. But second of all, she is a hero because she was able to put her pain aside and put on that face for you and allow you to do the things that you did, but also to celebrate with you, even though maybe she didn't feel it as deep down as she would have. So I think you have nothing to apologize for. Your mom's awesome too.
Well, thank you. She's a pretty incredible woman. And I'm very fortunate to have a great family that's supportive and understanding and willing to have this dialogue. Michael, thank you so much again for your time and for elevating the awareness of mental illness. You're doing incredible things. I'm proud of you. I'm proud to know you, and I'm right behind you, buddy, supporting you. And if you ever need anything from me moving forward, I'm here for you.
Well, you know what I would need from you is need
money.
From you. No, you know what? I would never, even though the answer should be yeah, for sure. I would never ask a friend for money. I mean, but I would ask you, I would say, okay, you have an entree into a world of famous people that have a message that we could take from them to get it out. You have access to a world of recognizable names, and those recognizable names can make a difference in other people's lives. So that's what I would want from you. So you and I work together to get this message out and use others and the platforms that we would get because of them.
I love that. I would love to do that with you. Thank you. And I also want to remind our listeners to make sure they most definitely follow Isolation Nation, Sick Not Weak. And if they want to learn more about this show, they can go to sicknotweak.com. It's such a wonderful show. There's just so much great information on your shows, and you have awesome guests, Michael. I love what you're doing. I'm really, really, really excited about it.
Thanks. Yeah, so people should go check that out, or just call me on the phone. Hey, like I said, I got nothing to do. I need someone. I need some ego stroking here. Hello, I'm in my house. You don't want your ego stroked by your family because you take it for granted after a while. So call me and tell me I'm awesome.
Or email you. I know you have people emailing you
all the time.
I love that. Thank you, Michael. You're the best. Adore you, and we will do this again.
Say hi to Craig for me. Give your last time or 2 times ago, I guess I met your daughter as well. So you give her a hug, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for giving me the chance. Awesome job, Soleil.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Wow. How fantastic was that? Hopefully, Michael, stick around, please, Michael, if you can. I appreciate that. That was just so awesome. I got to say, Jamie, first of all, you did just an amazing job here. I want to apologize to everybody listening right now. I know Michael's going to say, Peter, you shouldn't have to do that as a producer, but as a caring producer, I do care. There's a lot of noise on these lines for some reason. I don't know why, and we're going to figure that out. Yeah, there's something going on, but I hope people will fight through the audio part of this and really take a listen to everything that Michael and Jamie discussed, because it's so important that we have these conversations and that we stay open to all these things. So I apologize in advance, Jamie. I was working diligently trying to.
It's all good.
But I was so intrigued by the show. I mean, I was listening to Michael and everything he said, and the questions you asked and so on. And anyway, I just wanted to add this part of it. What I love about what Michael's doing now is that. He's very, I know he doesn't like these things, but I'm going to say it anyway. He's very iconic when it comes to, broadcasting. Everybody across the country in Canada certainly knows him. And to be given, the gift of being able to use
Yeah.
that voice now to literally reach people that you would never imagine you would, especially talking about subjects that are as big as mental health and wellness and suicide. I mean, these are just giant subjects, but to use your voice that way, I just thought it was so powerful. And again, I love his transparency. Just loves the fact that this is me, and take it. I just love that. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, I don't have the courage to do that yet. I really don't. We all wear masks and stuff, and
Yeah.
I don't have that courage yet. I so
I
admire
think
it when I see it.
the most important thing is that people like him are relatable, right? Because as soon as we see that he's gone through that too, then you go, oh, okay, well, I am so human. We're all spiritual beings having a human experience. So it makes it so much easier when people, like he said about that kid in Saskatchewan that was here listening to him. As soon as they hear like, oh, he struggled with that too, I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Or there is hope. There is help.
Absolutely. And
I
again,
love
I want to
that.
emphasize, and we didn't emphasize it a whole bunch here, but certainly it was my first viewing of it, of the documentary. The documentary can be found. I found it on YouTube. You can kind of go through that way with it as well. But the documentary, let me just get the name right here: Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me. And
Yep.
that is just a fabulous documentary. And
Yeah.
when you see the people that Michael engages with and has that open conversation with, it's eye-opening. So Jamie, walk us out. Tell us a couple aha moments you got from that amazing conversation, and we'll take it home.
Thank you, Peter. I just really appreciate that conversation with Michael. Again, just reiterating the importance of keeping going, even though we have failures in our life or challenges in our life, things that show up for us that really want to bring us down, and surrounding yourself with people who do love you and support you. And one of the other things that I coach on a lot is really finding your passion. And I love how he said that he likes how he feels when he's giving of himself. And so he's tapped into his purpose and his passion, and being able to give back, doing what he absolutely loves, is so incredibly fulfilling. And he has found his true happiness. And again, just the importance of speaking out and having this dialogue with our children and our friends. And just because someone's not showing any signs and they're wearing their mask and they're being brave and acting courageous doesn't mean that they don't have any sadness or a struggle. So if someone's not reaching out to you, please reach out to them. And I think that is really key, especially today. We are all struggling at different times and different days and with different things right now. So reach out to somebody if you haven't heard from them in a while. And I just want to say that was, again, another fantastic conversation. I'm so incredibly grateful and feel so blessed that I can bring these insightful stories about transformation to you so that you can hopefully feel inspired, empowered, and courageous moving through your own challenges. Having a new perspective that these difficult times are some of our greatest gifts, that they show up for us to learn lessons. Thank you so much for watching today. I am really looking forward to our next show. And remember that if you have any questions or comments, please email them to me at jamiesoleil.com. Have an amazing rest of your day and dream big.